Here we go. Is it working for you if you hit record? Yep. All right, here we go. Going live. Stand by. Going live. Ladies and gentlemen, Rex Bear Leak Project. Look who's next to me. The man, the legend, the way of life. Gerald Clark. So excited to have you back on the program, Gerald. It's been way too long.
Yeah.
And it's really exciting to see where you're at now and where I'm at now. We've got some similarities, but also total opposite things at the same time. Like you're in the jungle, high elevation. I'm in high elevation in the forest, but we both got forests in our backyards. Yours is tropical. Mine's going to get freezing here pretty soon. And here's what's really exciting is I go back to some of these podcasts that you and I used to do and some of the old topics that we discussed, and we got deep. We went way out there. We uncovered so much, and hundreds of thousands of views later, I feel like a lot of people, their minds have opened up as well. So we're going to have a very good conversation today, ladies and gentlemen, about not only how the Anunnaki created us to do the work for them, to be the original artificial intelligence. We are literally the original robots, but guess what? They made us biologically, not with technologies such as titanium alloy and quantum computers and such. Our brain is a quantum computer. And with all the research that I have done, I think that Gerald and I have a lot of, we agree on a lot of things, such as we were literally created to do work for a different intelligence, for a different set of beings. And the Anunnaki are absolutely real and outside of the Zachariah Sitchin stories. For example, the Enuma Elish was translated by somebody completely different, and the Anunnaki are specifically described in the Enuma Elish. And also the primordial deity Tiamat is described, and how Tiamat creates Enki and these pantheon of the Anunnaki. So there's a lot of stuff that's been hidden as well. So many people know about Enki. So many people know about Marduk and Enlil and Anu and Inanna. But what about Tiamat and King U? Well, who better to bring on the program than probably one of the best versed, most educationally, you've done more research into the Anunnaki than just about anybody that I've ever had a chance to talk to, and if not anybody. So I thank you for coming back on the program. Really excited to have you on the show. How the heck are you, Gerald?
I'm doing great. You know, you were reminiscing about where we were when we first encountered each other. Can you hear me okay? I got to move up to the mic a little bit. I've had the opportunity to sit back and watch you as your channel went from, I think you had maybe 16,000 people when I met you way back then, to where we were in that discussion to what you've done on your own. So you've come a long way in your own unveiling of this stuff, because you didn't just leave it alone. You kept turning over every stone, looking. You were on the Oxford online Sumerian cuneiform language site where you were looking at this stuff and reading that stuff yourself. And I think that's very important that you put your own eyes on that original source stuff, because it changes you in some way. And so I've been watching this, and yes, people know now because of these discussions we've been having who Enki and Marduk and some of the main players are. But what you're bringing up is going back even further into the Enuma Elish, which was one of the documents that I decoded as well. In both of my books, I did it one way for people in the first book, and I did it a second way in the second book, so it wasn't more blow by blow. It was more a deep interpretation of what this meant for our current state in our solar system. So,
absolutely, Gerald, and thank you for that. Much appreciated. I'll pay you later for the compliment. And you know, that is one thing about me is if somebody brings up a interesting topic and I want to know the truth and the details, I'm going to go on my, get as much information as I can on all aspects and bring it together. And every time these Sumerian tablets seem to have some type of foundation or cornerstone to these religious teachings. Mm-hmm. And even the Sumerians took that storyline from the Aratta civilization. And, they kind of incorporated it, et cetera. But the Sumerian king list is incredible, where you go back over 280,000 years. And I would like to know your interpretation of the Enuma Elish, because I literally just did a breakdown on the first half of that. And I think that there's a lot of astro-theology incorporated with it. Mm-hmm. And I want to get your take on that.
Well, first of all, you're right. When they told the story of their solar system getting perturbed and their planet and their stars, if you will, their constellation getting trapped into our galaxy, they told it as an allegory of a battle. Okay, and they oftentimes told things as allegories this way. And this one, each of the planets took on one of the Anunnaki's names from way back in ancient times, and they even used, excuse me, more of their ancient names than they even used once they came to Earth. For example, we know that Enki was affiliated with the planet Neptune, and I gave a list of the names they gave to the planets in their allegory from the Enuma Elish in my first book. I gave a table of that, so I don't have that in front of me. I didn't know we were going to cover that today, but Enki was affiliated with the planet Neptune, and he went by the name Nudimmud. Okay, and his father called him Ea Nudimmud. So he kind of had two edifices. Whoops. Oh, there you go. Okay, he brought you. So you're bringing up the Enuma Elish now. And anyway, so they had different names in it, and the allegory of affiliating their names with these planets was their way of kind of memorializing themselves through history. They still do this. Mumu just showed up there. You saw Mumu. That was one of my favorites. That was Mercury. Okay. So I'm not getting any audio.
See, you just connected two dots for me that I would like to say thank you. Mumu, Mercury, that makes total sense. But then you said Enki and Neptune, and then that just was like a swing moment for me. I was like, swing! Now I get it, because he's talking about the Abzu and the great Abzu and coming from the waters. And many of these old storylines talk about this being that comes from to give teachings and creation. But I was thinking Enki actually stood for Earth. So when they were talking about the creation of Ea, I thought it was Earth. So that's actually Neptune in the Enuma Elish.
Yeah, his planet was Neptune. Let me just see what I can do from memory on those. Ningshita got Mumu, so he was Mercury, and he still remained Mercury all through history, right? Hermes, Thoth always had planet Mercury. Anu had Uranus. Anshar and Kishar mapped to two of the planets, and they were ancestors, but then some of the children took on the names of those planets later on. Enlil took on the planet Jupiter, okay? So he was the god Jupiter in Rome, remember? Okay, so his planet in the Enuma Elish is Jupiter. Marduk was interesting because by the time we got this Enuma Elish in Babylon, there were several versions of it. And this particular one that showed up in Stephanie Dalley's book from the University of Oxford, the one who sponsors the Etzel online cuneiform site that you like, you know what I'm talking about? That's the same university that she comes from. Okay. Well, anyway, in that Enuma Elish, it was pretty clear that what we were looking at was the old Babylonian version, and there were other versions as well. But by the time it made it to Babylon, Marduk had renamed the home planet Nibiru, and that's why he calls Nibiru Marduk in the in the Enuma Elish that was read every spring in Babylon. But it wasn't originally named that. You can actually go back to the Etzel documents, and they didn't have all of the optical character recognition that we do now when they were doing some of those. So if you look up NIBRU, it shows up in there. Okay, so people go, wow, Nibiru doesn't show up in there, but look up NIBRU and you'll find it. So things like that.
It's in the Enuma Elish, Nibiru. Matter of fact, that's why it's even in this specific translation right here.
Oh,
and
really?
I think that's fascinating.
Which one? Which one did
NIBERU.
I'm sorry, we talked over each other. Which translation do you have?
Let me show you. It doesn't even show specifically it's a college, but I don't think it's even from Oxford. Let me pull it up. I've got the link for this in the video description box. Yeah. But if you go, if I've read through this twice the past 24 hours.
Oh, this is and the Akkadian. This is Akkadian. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
And it specifically says Anunnaki, and it specifically says Nibiru. And it's interesting, Gerald, because when it was talking about Marduk, I was thinking it was talking about Mars and like the battles with like literally the planetary alignments hitting other planets, the constellations, astro-theology. But now you're saying Marduk is linked to Nibiru, and that brings up a whole other Pandora's box to get into. This is fascinating.
Well, I did a show called Marduk Arrival, Marduk Lucifer Arrival, or something like that on my 7-Planet Broadcasting, where I talked about him equating himself with the planet of crossing way back when. It showed up in the Enuma Elish. So yeah, so now you see that, so you can see a lot of the terminology referring to Nibiru he used for himself. And I think it was show number 5 on the 7-Planet Broadcast I did on that one. We'll have to bring it up. But in my, we'll have to share. I wish I'd had the share ability and I knew my bandwidth could handle it. I would bring up the table of the planets and what the Anunnaki called them in the Enuma Elish. But it's in my Anunnaki of Nibiru first book. Do you have that readily available to you there?
Let me see if I can find it, because I literally only brought up a van full of stuff with me from San Antonio. Okay, but I think I have that book here, so I'll look for it while you're talking.
I could try to bring up the PDF and try to do a share if you want to try it, because I have the table there. Or we can just talk through this if you want.
Yeah, please.
I think there's which one do you want me to do? You want me to try and bring it up?
The PDF. That'd be great.
All right, so talk for a minute. Let me find it. So you understand that it was an allegory, but in addition, there was astro-theology in there as well. So apparently, from my understanding is they, when their planet got caught in a disruptive event, and I believe it was the crossing of the galactic center that disturbed their solar system or their galaxy and our galaxy, which are very close to each other. And they may have been out at the extremity of their solar system such that their little constellation, Nibiru and the other planets, were stripped off and caught up into our solar system and their sun became our binary twin to our sun. I believe that's truly what happened. Okay, so one of the things they noticed is when they got caught in that inner orbit with our solar system was some of the effects from Mumu. Mumu is actually Ningshita, Mercury. He's associated with Mercury. When they noticed Mercury was giving off a certain radiance, which would be radiation, as they approached in, they got very concerned. And this is when he started having discussions with his father, Ea, Nudimu, to describe how they were going to deal with this as they came inbound on the first passage. And that's, I believe, what I decoded in this. Oh, here, you see, after Ea had vanquished and trampled down his foe. So he's talking about this threat coming from Mercury. He talked about basically veiling the radiation from Mercury so that it wasn't going to affect them when they passed. Damkina, who's shown there, is his wife. That was Enki's wife. So, and
what do you think about Tiamat and Kingu?
Well, Tiamat, I believe, was the original planet that's in place where the Earth approximately is now. So they were seeing Tiamat as they came in, and I truly believe they were using Tiamat as a advanced colony where they were using it to observe the inner planets. Okay, so it was basically where our Earth is now, and they called it Tiamat, and they had actually occupants on Tiamat that were somehow affiliated with a force that looked like it was revolting a bit against the infrastructure on Nibiru. So Marduk was summoned to go to battle with Tiamat, the dragon, and that's told as an allegory and a rival in here as well. Okay, but I think truly what you're looking at there is the destruction of part of Tiamat had to do with the collision or the intentional destruction by the Anunnaki, because it was actually looked like it was going to have an impact with one of their satellites, whether it was Nibiru or one of their suns. It was important to them that this be taken out of the way. So that's truly what I believe was the issue, is during their retrograde orbit, they had an issue with worrying about a collision with Tiamat. And now we know.
So how did Marduk, did they use weapons then? Because I was just reading through that and it was talking about how they summoned Marduk to use these cyclones and bring weapons from all four corners. And he launched some type of spear into Tiamat when she opened her mouth to consume him, but instead he shot a spear and it ripped her apart. And that to me is, I'm thinking, okay, the asteroid belt. I'm thinking even today, I shared an article from the University of Florida describing how there's 4 or 5 planetary bodies, ancient planetary bodies, that make up about 85% of the meteorites we have tested in the solar system. So that is like meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Science is confirming these ancient stories if you use the astro-theological underpinnings. And then I think you are taking it to the next level with adding these people as actual, living beings, not just archetypes that literally did and probably still do colonize space. And like Jupiter Ascending describes in a movie that you can understand in, a couple of hours, I think it puts it into perspective what these beings have maybe been doing for millions or billions of years.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I've got this PDF pulled up if you want me to try to share it. Let me try. Okay.
That'd be great.
This one.
And for those of you wondering, I'm wearing a 5G shielding EMF fabric liner that comes with these awesome Leak Project caps. But I just wanted to sport the liner because I think it just has like this really cool look to it. Anyway, back to you, Gerald.
Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can see the for some reason I've got a rank over here. This was the order from the Anunnaki, given the planet number. So you can see Earth is number 7 and Nibiru is number 12 down here. Okay. So these are the celestial bodies up here. Then this was in the Enuma Elish. This is the name they gave them. So you can kind of make the correlation. This was really important for me to be able to do this because then it helped me decode the Enuma Elish much better. Okay. So the sun is Apsu. The moon is Kingu. Mercury is Mumu. Venus is Lahamu, Earth is Ki, as you mentioned, right? And then Mars is Lamu, Jupiter is Kishar, Saturn is Anshar. And you'll see those in my genealogy table too, right? Anshar and Kishar. Neptune is Nudimmud, who's Enki. Uranus is Anu. Pluto is Gaga. That was the name that they gave to that one. And then Nibiru was renamed Marduk in the old Babylonian version right here, okay? Does that make sense? Okay.
It makes sense, but I do have a question though.
Okay.
Because the Apsu is described, oftentimes it's translated as fresh water.
Well, that's there's 2 of them. There's ABZU and then there's APSU. And this is, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if that's because of how they translated the consonants way back when or whatever, but I do see those names used in a confusing way. Abzu is oftentimes referred to in the documents as being Africa and also as a place in Mesopotamia. So, and they did this often, like they had an Eker fortress in Africa, but they also had an Eker temple in Mesopotamia. So I'm like, oh, which one are they talking about? The one in Mesopotamia or the one in Africa? So they did that. And they had a city in Mesopotamia called Nibiru that was the same name as their planet. And you'll see this in the Etzel documents when you search in that. We've been sharing this on Facebook recently, but yeah, it's for real. So anyway, does that help with this planetary affiliation?
Big time.
Okay.
Absolutely it does. So if this is correct, if you've broken this down, this answers so many questions. And as far as Nibiru goes, the one thing that I am still up in the air about is if it's a planet, if it's literally some type of starship, if it is, I mean, it's something. And for some reason, the majority of translators have not been able to come up with anything except for there is a Nibiru, which is was a capital in ancient Mesopotamia, absolutely. But there's different variants, like you also showed with just that one letter. So one thing that I think is fascinating, Gerald, and I'm sure you'll agree with me on this, is the translations. I mean, you've got to be spot on to get a perfect translation. Imagine trying to translate somebody using English slang even today. Like somebody goes, yo, man, that's dope. Yo, this that's cold, man. That's cold. And you're saying that's cold, but it's really not cold. So you try and you know what I mean?
Oh, totally, totally. So what I'm scrolling past here for people just real slowly is my first take on interpreting the Enuma Elish. And this is right from my book, The Anunnaki of Nibiru, on page 44.
Is it still available at Gerald Clark 77?
Yes, and it's also available on Amazon, and we sell it as a USB and audiobook, all kinds of stuff. So, and then what I did after I did it blow by blow is I actually kind of coalesced it into a more of a, instead of a sporting event where this one did this one or that one, I put it into a bigger context, and that's what I did right after doing that. And I did that in even a different way in the Seventh Planet, because I think this story that you've zeroed in on, this Enuma Elish, is so important for us to understand. First of all, if
You
these,
there?
yeah, you want me to unshare this? Okay.
Yeah, I think you froze up for a second.
Okay, let me unshare that. Did that help?
It does.
Okay.
It does. Now, are you still under the impression that the Anunnaki have a big control mechanism in place over the world today, and that these signs on these flags represent the houses of these Anunnaki?
Yes, but I think a lot of the control, I think they lost control of humanity by giving us intelligence and free will. But they do have a control infrastructure in that's done through their liaisons, and they're sitting at the very top. Okay, I don't think they're sitting in a bureaucratic office in some government headquarters pulling strings. No, those are liaisons for them. But I do think the very top of the control structure of this world is not human. And it's actually, it looks like a coalition between the Anunnaki, the Draco, and the Markov Greys right now. That doesn't mean there aren't several others. It looks like there are several species on this planet. But the ones that are actually in direct contract or even care about humanity, like us or hate us, there seems to be about 9 of them, according to the threat briefing report. And 3 of them are directly involved with us. And that's the Anunnaki, the Draco, and the Greys. Even our government has a contract since 1934 with the Greys. This was signed on a boat in Panama, and it was continued under Eisenhower in 1954. Okay, so 20-year interval from 34 to 54. They had a time and things weren't working out very well, but they were allowing abductions and all kinds of things in the contract between these Greys to pacify them. Well, I see those Greys as the low-level, I don't know, gophers for the Draco, who like to get some of these people that get abducted, and God only knows what it is they're doing besides possibly eating them and all these things, okay? But apparently that's what happens. And the Anunnaki are at the top, using the Draco, I think, for intermediate control, and they have different functions and different capabilities. And I really think a lot of the abductions and the interactions with the Greys is because these are essentially biological avatars that are doll bodies that operate well in environments that are devoid of resources. They don't need to be fed, but apparently they do have an affinity for and need chemicals from human blood, just like the Draco do. So that's kind of scary to me to know that, yes, that's the control infrastructure. And I think if you go to the top of the Illuminati and look at the 13 families that are at the top, they were chosen, I believe, to probably be a mixing of their blood, and also as the dark agents who have to implement this control structure on the planet for the rest of us. So,
Now, when you said dark agents, you're referring to the Emerald Tablets of Thoth when describing the Dark Brotherhood, the serpents that work through high positions of power.
Yeah, I don't think this kind of behavior that you're seeing, the sociopathic, non-human characteristics, willing to be participating in child trafficking and breaking up families and vaccinating and poisoning your food. This is not humans that are doing this, okay? I believe this is coming from the New World Order aliens that have a contract on this planet. They only need so many of us, like Jupiter Ascending. I mean, my God, imagine they are using our bodies and chemicals from our bodies to prolong their life. Well, isn't that essentially what they're insinuating through vampirism and even that movie, which was even more specific, you know. But so I do believe those dark entities that were brought in through another dimension, and they could be Draco, they could be Grace. Apparently, from the KGB report, there were 80 different species that have visited this planet. And I was watching it, and there was more than a handful of them that looked reptilian. There's not just one; there were several of them. So it just so happens that the Draco could either be winged or wingless. So our whole idea of the old gargoyle fears that we saw in the movies, well, that's real apparently. And so that control infrastructure is in place, but I don't think it's gone unopposed. I do believe that domain forces, light forces, if you will, galactic forces that are outside of the Anunnaki even, have an interest, and they have certain laws in the galaxy that don't allow certain things. And so, and that also impacts our planet, I believe. So there's a battle going on for control of resources on this colonized planet, just like there are in lots of others. And it just so happens that we're the indigenous population just now figuring out, but that we're the cattle being hauled around and being sold, and we're waking up to it. And it's an interesting time because of that. I think it very much coincides with the timing of a universal consciousness, because how long has this been going on? And now all of a sudden we're just now figuring it out? Thousands of years, right? Why are we figuring it out now?
Well, that's a great question. And I would say because of the, position where we're at in the universe, literally, if you think about it, how much effect the stars and the planets have over us. And you've talked about this before, when the constellations change in the skies, you think there's a transitioning of power with these Anunnaki, and there very well could be. And there's another thing that I'd like to say is, I think that this is another thing that brings me back to the Enuma Elish, describing how we were created to do the work for the gods. We are the original robots. We are the original artificial intelligence, and we're doing the same thing now. We're there's people out there that are creating these computer systems that are so advanced and are connected to all these other computer systems that could literally, if there's just one piece of code written wrong or it becomes self-aware, it could decimate the entire planet like that.
Yeah. This reminds me of Neo visiting the architect, right, in the Matrix.
Yeah.
Exactly
exactly.
Well, you bring up a really good point. So they knew in that movie that there were certain things that could cause the simulation to go bad, right? To go wrong. And Neo finally figured out in the room while he was talking to the architect. Do you remember what he came up with? What was the problem in the simulator?
Well, he keeps doing the same thing over and over again.
Well, he thought it was choice. He goes, you gave us choice, and that's why this anomaly keeps happening, is because we keep, instead of just giving the choice of A, B in a bipolar system like what they do in elections, right? You get the Democrats or the Republicans. Well, I don't want to vote for either one of those, right? Well, that it doesn't matter because that's the only choices, right? Well, he was saying through this choice that he found the anomaly path that led him to become the one that broke out of the simulation. It's the Truman Show story. It's the same story, right? So in essence, why are we being shown that? Okay, because really, I think we are at a place in the galactic center, or approaching it, where there's a very large energetic difference than there is on our normal path. Okay, when you get to the center of where the energy is all being accumulated, there's just more energy. Well, what does that do to a human with an antenna? It's going to change you in some way. As a matter of fact, from what I've been reading in atomic expansion theory and some of the reports I've read, when the sun changes quanta in its normal lifespan from a accumulating mass of gas and rocks and dirt to something that takes on such mass that it self-implodes, ignites, and becomes a nuclear source, like what a sun is. Well, at some point in time, it either takes on more fuel or it dies. Well, if it takes on more fuel, it's possible it could become a neutron star, right, and explode with too much energy, right? Well, in essence, our pathway is very much similar to the life of a star. So as we take our matter close to the galactic center and get hit with this external energy, not only does the sun have the potential to change quantas and put out a different frequency of light, And when it does that, listen, it changes all life. All life is changed and regulated by the solar energy. You know that, I know that. The Mayans knew that, and they encoded that in their calendar and counted, well, which sun are we in, number 1 or 5, you know? Well, the Mayan fifth sun was their prediction of what would happen when we reached the universal consciousness, which they knew happened at the dark rift center. And that's because of all the energy there. You're exactly right. So are we getting close to that place? And is that what's causing all of us to start waking up? I think it is. I truly think it is. And it's happening all over. It's not. And it's been, I think it's been tried to be regulated with geoengineering spraying to keep certain frequencies of light from striking the earth. It's not just about keeping us from seeing Nibiru. I think it's about changing the ascension window to try to get as many slaves as you can before the whole simulation changes. And I think that's what the great year window of ascension is that time when you get hit as a species with so much energy that it's very possible that the entire species was intended by the creator of all to transition to a new experience, not a material experience as a avatar that's immortal, but maybe you experience possibly getting the responsibility of having to try to take the consciousness of a whole planet forward yourself, as if you're going to be the god on that planet. Now think about how hard that would be if you got cast in that position just like Thoth did. I mean, imagine you're going like, I'm off to my celestial hammock. I just did an epic here on this planet. I'm done. And you get told, well, maybe hang around until after the age of darkness has passed. And you got to take some hairy barbarians to the light. That's your job for the next age on this planet, right? In this dimension. Well, I think that's very possible for all of us to have that in our path, is that presented to us. So I think we're in an ascension window. And I think you manifest your own reality. We all do as co-creators of the creator of all. And if you're manifesting the reality that you're going to go forward in your spiritual path, take on any form you want, any role you want to be who you really are at your essence, I think that's going to happen for a lot of people. But the ones that are still living in the slave system, that are too afraid to face themselves and break out, like the Truman Show or like Neo did, you're gonna end up back in the same matrix, and maybe you'll be given another opportunity to get out. I don't know, but I see a window right now where humanity has the information age, has the internet, has CRTs where we can all see this at once, and wow, that I don't think has ever been inexistent in history that we know of. We're at a very special time right now, and I don't think it's going to last.
Well, we certainly are, and I'm glad you brought that up, because we can share our information with the world. I mean, you're on the other side of the continent right now, and we're having a great conversation, and people from all around the world listen to Gerald Clark, listen to Leap Project, and the internet brings that information to the table. And I think it's fascinating that there are people waking up, and I still think, though, that there's a good portion, at least 90%, that is so zombified, that is to the point of no return in awakening to the breaking out of the matrix. And like that part in the movie where the guy that sells out Neo to Agent Smith says, hey, this steak isn't real, but it tastes delicious. And there's also a part in that film where I think Morpheus says to Neo, there's a point in somebody's life where you can't wake them up. It's just too late. And maybe they'll get another chance next go around. But you think we're in a limited time here. So as far as that goal to transcend to a higher level of consciousness, now let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's say we do get to that level, Gerald, and I really hope that we do. What is that going to mean for us here? Does that mean that the technologies are going to be readily available? They're anti-aging, reverse aging, no disease, war will cease to exist, people will actually live with the earth in harmony? I mean, what's going to happen?
Well,
Jetpacks.
There's two schools of thought. Everything you just described there was if a meat host was going to try to make itself eternal, just like in the movie Mr. Nobody, right? Where nobody dies. But they never left the slave system, is the point of that. Because your intention of your design, in my opinion, is only to have a temporary experience as a transient meat host. You're an eternal energy source that can take on a body or any kind of body at will once you leave this particular portion of the simulator. Okay, and that's what I actually see happening. And I kind of looked at the words that Thoth gave us, where he kept promising the Emerald Tablets. Well, guess what? These dimensions are going to merge, and your destiny as a species is to become light. But what does that mean? Does that mean we're a light bulb for some alien factory? What does it mean? Well, in his premise for light, he believes the creator of all is the source of all, which is light. And light, in my opinion, as a scientist, is the most unmanifested energy that can create matter, right? This is the, I guess you call the light encoding of the reality matrix. How do you take energy, stitch it together with molecules, and produce this reality we see all around us, right? Rocks and trees and sticks and you. It's all put together with an energy template that somehow can stitch atomic elements together and molecules together to create a functional whole. And that in itself, from a genetic engineering standpoint, that blows my mind. Okay, really, that some beings have this ability. And this goes back to what you were describing in the first avatars in the Atrahasis. In that account, which is mind-blowing, Enki working with Ninmah, or Belit Ili, she goes by many names in the account, the mother of the gods, the womb goddess, okay, his half-sister, okay, they are chartered by the council in the Atrahasis to go create a primitive man to replace these rebel miners that just showed up surrounding the Eker fortress. And by the way, I put this in my screenplay. Well, at this point, you start reading through this and what they did. Yeah, they messed around with trying to mix genetics with animals and all kinds of things. And they kept having failures until Enki decided that he was going to use their genetic material with another primitive one. But the way they did it was bizarre. It wasn't just enough to create the zygote with the mixing and the in vitro fertilization. It wasn't even in vitro. They did it in a petri dish and then inseminated her. Well, he did this ritual where basically somebody was killed and their energy was taken and put into this body. I mean, at this point, it's like, this is like witchcraft, right? What we would call just crazy stuff. And all through the counts of their underworld experience, they were managing the essence of their avatars. Somehow that energy in a repository under Nergal and Ereshignal in the underworld stories. And they could then do trades and take that energy and put it back into a body if they wanted to. But they were managing it like they had a quota. You see what I'm saying? So
like a soul farm.
Yeah, well, I believe that discussion in the Atrahasis, where they could take energy and upload it to a host and create a new avatar. I've been reading some data recently that if you can sense the human energy body and record it electronically, that you could then keep it eternally, and you could load that into a synthetic brain, a real brain. And they're doing this back and forth now, apparently, in labs. Have you heard anything about this?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
really?
and to add to that, I even read an article yesterday that they can put miniaturized computers that work efficiently inside of human cells. So your DNA is essentially what you just brought up, and they could be anytime activating what you're seeing, what you're hearing. Like, we are the drones for them.
Right.
They could be in a sleep state, so they're not aging. And they're like, okay, let's go to quadrant B. Oh, what's Gerald doing today? And Gerald's like, no, get out of my mind.
Well, worst of all, if you don't know that they can use you as a telemetry meat modem, I love that term, meat modem, because a modem can transmit and receive. So imagine they can occupy a part of your sensory system to see exactly what you're seeing anytime they want to. They can use your eyes like they're a UAV bird or an insect, right? Any biological entity that they have the genetic code for, they can use it as a telemetry sensor and as an actuator, meaning they can tell it to do things. Hey, look, Gerald's trying to learn to surf. Let's send a great white over there and have an encounter. This will be great. Like that.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
literally a fly on the wall. You know that saying, right?
Yeah. Well, when you realize what the three-letter agencies are doing with their little drones and UAVs. I mean, they're making dragonflies and all kinds of things that are sensors, and they make them look like they're real in nature, but they can fly. They're imitating the exact nature. You're not going to be able to distinguish a nano machine from a real one very shortly. It's going to be hard to distinguish. How are you going to do it? Right.
And pretty soon, you probably won't even be able to see them. They'll use nanotechnologies like inner space that can literally be, cruising around in your body. Who knows? I mean, the advanced technologies are, the white papers that I've read are beyond science fiction now.
But you're exactly right. We're the avatars that are waking up to the fact that we were asleep all this time. Well, who let us wake up is what I'm saying. See, this is the thing where you don't know how much of it's coming from the outside because of this energetic band in the galactic center that the Mayans knew about. They even designed their ball game around this, for Pete's sake. Kicking the ball, getting the ball to go through that little hoop was representative of the time when our sun went through the middle of the galactic center. That's exactly what it was about. So it was very symbolic, and it came from Thoth now. So when he gave him the calendar, so he knew about this event in 3114 BCE. He started the countdown for the Mayan long count, which counted down to the time that our solar system is going to go through the galactic center again. And that's happening right now. Think about that.
Let me add to that, Gerald, because you just literally, I had that wow moment again. It happens a lot when we do these podcasts. Mm-hmm. So the Earth is expanding. Fissures are opening up around the world. Volcanoes are going off. The earthquakes, get this. This is a fascinating statistic.
I watched your show. Go for it.
Okay. Yeah. So how much it's gone up. So 2009, the Earth had 14,000 and some change earthquakes. Last year, it had 115,000 plus earthquakes. This year alone, just last month, there was more earthquakes than entire years. Previously, we've had over 50,000 earthquakes. This year alone, we could be on track for 200,000 earthquakes. The birth signs are there. So the reason I brought this up is because the Mayan prophecies, the 2012, December 2012, this is really when the jump started. So do you think, Gerald, that, and this correlates with Cliff High and the expanding theory, the grand solar minimum, and the sun getting smaller, cosmic rays hitting the center of the Earth, and you're adding an extra layer to this, but I'm also taking that where the Earth gets bigger, the sun gets smaller, the magnetosphere weakens, and that is the what we're experiencing now. And then we could have this cosmic force that just takes it to the next level. So it's all kind of integrated at one point.
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. And what I see is a kind of a simple model. If we've got a solar system that's going to transit a dense band of energy and debris, that's what the galactic center is, that dark rift. I mean, it's because of, you got a spinning field, and basically it's creating, that, I don't know, like a UFO shaped field, a torsion field. And out in that little band right in the middle is where a lot of the debris gets pulled and aggregates. Okay. And it's true. We know that it's so strong in there that it can bend light, and it's doing all kinds of weird energetic things. Well, when you take a sun who's and I'm going to be a hillbilly for a minute. It's a burning rock, okay? And you're going to run it through a place that's full of gas and other debris that can make that rock burn hotter. What do you think could happen? It could actually get enough fuel in that transit, possibly, where it jumps to the next quanta in its lifespan as a star. It could go supernova. It could go to the next quanta level of energy that it's transmitting, so that all life changes. Well, I want to talk about this in terms of ascension and atomic expansion theory, because I just did a whole bunch of stuff on this, and I hope I don't get too deep, but
get as deep as you want, Gerald. This is Leak Project.
Okay. Well,
everybody needs to learn to swim.
So if the energy that you're receiving from the sun changes in such a significance, during that quanta shift stage, it'll actually create such energy that it'll push all any satellite that's still in orbit around it, it'll push it out a certain distance away from it, because nothing in that proximity would be able to survive with a quanta shift without more distance. Okay? So it keeps it's a weird self-regulating system with celestial bodies like this. And it's described in a very good paper that I shared in the Mayan Fifth Sun and Ascension timing video that I did online, okay? But in that process, something really weird happens that is explained by atomic expansion theory. Because of the change in energy, the molecular density could potentially be changed because of the energy coming from the sun. This is true for all life forms, okay? So that spacing in the molecules, what basically we call matter, okay, in these various bonds. Well, imagine that spacing changes, okay, because of something the sun did, right? All of a sudden, you're talking about a different density. Density is the compactness of those materials that are being brought together in those bonds, okay? So when we talk about the fifth density, the fourth density, imagine you somehow got hit with an energy with a molecular spacing, your body changed, where you're not in the range of density that physical beings with our visual system can detect. You would disappear right in front of somebody if that happened. You understand what I'm saying? This is how I see dimensions and densities being very similar to each other, and that we have 9 parallel worlds, according to Thoth, and the 9 Mayan underworld frequencies, where based on the frequency and the density, you could have 9, well, there could be millions or infinite numbers, but they call out 9 that could be happening simultaneously in the same space, in the same time. And so if this happens, I believe those who are not, if they are even capable of resisting that kind of energy in their body, I don't think no matter how much you strive in your spiritual path, I don't think you even have any idea of what we're talking about when this event happens, where the sun's energy changes relative to you. Your density will change potentially. And because of that, you're not even going to be of the same simulation that you're experiencing right now. You're going to be catapulted into a different density, which I believe the higher density beings are occupying, and they can see us all running around like pawns on this planet while we can't see them, okay? Because they can see whatever densities are below them, but not ones above them. I think that's how it works. So if you're at a higher density, you can see the beings at lower density, but you may not be able to interact with them other than through established parameters that are allowed for dealing with lower dimensional entities, which I think gets violated all the time. Right?
So what you just said, Gerald, was incredible, because it's making me think about these experiences that I've had in my life, you've had in your life. You've written about some of the synchronicities that you've had in the Mercury Rising. I think it was Mercury Rising where you wrote about your synchronicities, wasn't it? And
chapter 6.
For example, when I did a podcast, the first podcast I did on Inanna, and I found it via Sumerian Oxford University. I read through through the storyline of about how she's traveling the stars. She lands on Earth. She wakes up. She realizes that she got raped, and she's like, wait. And then she goes and she finds the guy that did it. And long story, and you've seen the podcast about it. But then the next day, I go out to this club that it's like a karaoke club kind of thing. I've never been there before. I'm not really into clubs or anything. I decide to go there, and I meet Brady. Brady's the gal that does all these paintings behind me. And she had this painting of Wonder Woman, which I feel is the Hollywood version of Inanna, the representation of Inanna. It was just like a very interesting synchronicity. And that's one of many that I've talked about. And I'm not even close to the most incredible synchronicity, but the first one that came to mind, that I think, okay, there's got to be something else out there orchestrating events and watching us from a bird's eye view, kind of like a hawk when it flies past you. It's seeing what's going on, but it's also orchestrating things behind the scenes. And then you see it and it's like, wow, something's making communications with me, contact with me. And that's what you're describing right here, is these higher dimensional beings.
Mm-hmm. I believe that's true. And so it really makes you wonder where your inspirations truly come from. And this goes back to the Greek concept of what inspiration was, is they believed that these higher dimensional Greek gods who were sitting on Mount Olympus that could puppeteer like this, that's portrayed so well in the movie Jason and the Argonauts, right? Is that they could see they basically would open up a little portal window whenever they wanted to see anything that was going on with you. And I'm sure it's even more sophisticated than that. And that you are the window, you're the telemetry meatmost. They can see everything through your eyes and your sensors and hear everything you're hearing anytime they want to. So I do think certain times in our lives, we don't know where those synchronicities or those deja vu things come from. But I truly think that we're all here to do a particular mission that's been given to us through our higher selves. It's eternal part of us. And as part of that, I think some of the controllers and the demiurgus, both on the light side and the dark side, get to play inspirational moments with us to push us along a particular evolutionary path that was intended for us, that I think we signed up for with a contract when we came into this experience, to be honest with you. We just don't remember.
Let me ask you a question. This is pretty deep, because I used to read the Old Testament and say, wow, how could a God create and be all knowing and then say, oh, my creation, you people are sinning. So, you know, I'm going to go tell these guys over here to go take out those guys because they're not worshiping me or because they're doing things that I don't want them to do, but I'm all knowing. I'm thinking, how could that be? How could that possibly be? When I read the Sumerian tablets, and I don't even like to use the term Sumerian tablets, because they took the information from the Aratta civilization.
Actually, you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's fascinating. And it shows up as the name Ararat, but we know it's a region, and it's very interesting.
Absolutely. I do want to talk about that. And just hold that thought real quick, because that's huge. And thank you for bringing that up. This is all that I was going to say. I used to look at Enlil and Yahweh as like, wow, how barbaric. You know, I mean, you're like, okay, you want a flood to happen. You want all these people, the men, women, and children, even the cattle taken out. Here's the way that I'm looking at that now. First of all, do I think that that's right? No, absolutely not. I'm looking at it, though, in a sense of if they were our creators, and if they created us like human beings go out there on a computer and say, okay, this program's going to decipher this code and this language. And then, for example, Facebook designed an algorithm that started to create its own language. And it was doing that because some people speculate, there's some pretty good technical information to back this up, that in fears of if it realized that its programmers knew that it was communicating in a more efficient manner, they'd just shut off the code. They just turn it off. And that's what happens every time. Anytime the code starts to break out of the code a little bit or do something that wasn't designed by the programmer, what does the programmer do? Hey, turn the computer off, shut it off. Just like you, Phil, that Enki gave us the soul molecule or the source to have essence. And you could be right on that, man. I mean, I'm getting the chills just thinking about it. The hair's standing up on my body just talking about this. How magical is the soul, and thank the divine that we do have that opportunity. And if Enki did encode that into our DNA, into this physical creation so that we could break out of that, hey, God bless you, literally. I just don't know what God is. But where was I going with this? Enlil. Maybe Enlil looked at the code that was designed as, you know, losing control, as doing things that it wasn't supposed to be doing. So Enlil gathered with his council, with the creators, and said, look, you know, our creation is just, they're way out of control. You need to reset it. And how do we do it? What's the most efficient, least barbaric way to do it? Or, you know, you can look at it as this being that's just like superior and just wants to be worshiped. And because that's kind of the way that the Bible interprets it. But once again, you can get into translations, and you can get into the very solid fact that many demons today that are considered evil were considered gods of fertility and happiness and kindness 1,000 years ago. So do you think that that might have been why it happened? Because like maybe Enlil isn't as bad as some people portray him, and some people look at Enlil as the saving grace too. You know, so it's like one person's torture is another person's paradise.
You bring up a really, really good question. Let me see if I can generalize it. Is it possible that these ancient role players could be playing more than one role at different ages, or even have more than one role at the same time? And here I'm going to give you an example. Imagine one of these beings' job was to protect certain information, right? So that the humans didn't get it. But if the human had evolved to a certain place, then they would change their edifice to be, oh, I'm not the evil trickster that you thought I was. I'm actually just doing that because you're not aware enough to be able to take on this information. But now that you are, I'm going to be a different entity for you. So I could be the deceiver and the initiator into the truth at the same time. Okay. So we like to give one entity just one role and go, well, you know, he was the commander, so he was kind of evil. Kind of like in the movie that John Travolta played, and remember that movie? Was it Battlefield Earth?
Battlefield Earth.
It wasn't that well done. It was nothing as good as the book because they totally left Enki out. But Marduk and Enlil got their playing in there through John Travolta, and I can never remember the black guy's name that played that role. He did it so well. I'll remember it in a minute. My memory must be going with my old age. Anyway, but so it's possible that they gave, well, let's go back to this archetype. Could Enki have created us with something?
Forrest Whitaker.
Forrest Whitaker, that's it, Forrest. Could Enki have created us with latent DNA circuits that were sensitive to energy, so that every time we went through the galactic center, we got to get out of the slave system? I think that would be the least he could do if he knew he was part of a slave system that was colonizing planets and creating hybrids to do their bidding. Listen, and this isn't new. This is apparently from the threat briefing report. This is the MO. They don't go in and invade a planet that's already occupied or they need to have it done. This is how it's done. And if there is a species there already, they'll hybridize it with their DNA until it's eliminated. And then they have their own workforce there. That's how they colonize other planets, okay? Is using biological hybrids, just like us. So.
You know, what you say there, people might say as a rebuttal, well, how come they don't just use robots? Well, first of all, if you think about it, if you know how to use biology, if you're a good geneticist and you can go out there and do some tinkering and manipulation, that's a much more efficient way. You can put a quicker life. I mean, think about the, yeah.
It's self-replicating, no factories. It's, yeah. I've gone through this many times about tools. I think a mixture, they definitely need a mixture. I mean, look at what you can do when you take I don't know, these underground tunneling machines that they've created now. You know, they can do like 7 to 10 miles of underground tunnel in a day. That's like, I mean, but do they have a human operator? Maybe. I'm sure that after a while they just get programmed, go from A to B, follow this vector, and you use your gyro stabilize internal things. You don't even need a satellite, just boom. But I think there was a long process where humans were just the source, and then tools got mixed in, because as soon as you give tools to a force, they could always be turned into weapons is the problem, right? You give them, yeah, that's the problem.
And didn't mean to interrupt there. I just got thinking about the Nag Hammadi scriptures. I know that they're not nearly as old as these ancient tablets, but when you read them, they connect so many dots to the Sumerian tablets and the Aratta civilization, which we're going to get into in just a minute, because it talks about how when the Archons, which I think they're referring to the Anunnaki, created Adam, they realized that Adam was greater than they were. So they're like, what do? We need to find a way to suppress him. Genetically modified foods, formaldehyde, thimerosal, genetically modified E. coli feces, toxic ingredients put in products that are designed and told and pitched to help you. It's a system of control. It's a system of enslavement. They do not want you to think for yourself. They do not want you to have access to your third eye and your full potential, because if we did, we would be the mutants in X-Men. We would be the superheroes like they're described in the movies. They don't want that. They fear. There's one of my favorite movies. It's an old one. It was called Legend. I hope you've seen this, Gerald, where you've got Satan, and Satan it's like the perfect Satan. And Satan is depicted with, that you would think of if you're Christian growing up, and that's a whole other story, who Satan is, etc. But in the movie, he's red. He's got the big horns, and he's huge. And there's this one part he's talking about people, and he goes, he's talking about those humans. They're so small and fragile, yet they have enough power to control an entire universe. They fear us. These higher beings fear our divinity. They fear whatever we were given at one point, and they're trying to get it back, and they're trying to control it and suppress it and feed off of it. And it's so blatant. It's so obvious to me right now. Like, I'm literally just, the energy is going through my body. Speaking of, we'll get to this in a little bit too, the antenna, how important proper posture is. And I know that mine is kind of tilted. You told me a little bit sometimes. It's because it's all that 5G, man. Thank goodness for the 5G cap. Hello. I will not assimilate. Loki's cool. Loki's coming back. He didn't get taken out by Thanos. Anyway, so where are we going?
Well,
Divagate.
well, you know, you bring up.
Aratta?
You want to talk about Aratta? I don't know. It's kind of like this mysterious place that ties together some loose ends from the Atrahasis, where, you know, it says it landed in the mountains of Ararat. It didn't say Mount Ararat, right, in the Atrahasis. So now we've figured out this is a little region. I guess it's really still in the southern part of Turkey, parts of it, but it's I guess we would call it modern day Armenia. Is that right? Does that sound right? Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. So I got to look into it more, but I just watched a special from this guy named Irving Finkel, who was talking about his experience as the curator at the British Museum, and he knew about Charles, or was it, what's the guy's name? Charles Smith or George Smith, the guy who discovered the first flood account. Okay, so I just watched a special on that, and he talked about in that movie or in that video about the region of Aratta, that they really now know that it wasn't just a mountain, it was a region. But and they talked about in the account, you know, when you see this region turn and come back and all the coordination, they've pretty much figured out where it is. And from what the pictures I've seen, I think they found it, some of the pieces of the old ark anyway. So, but it's a very interesting.
Well, that's awesome, because Göbekli Tepe was built by the Aratta civilization, and there's actually an incredible story called Enmerkar and the Lord of Aratta, and it describes how Inanna was actually she was convinced.
I gotta stop my video for a second. I'm getting interruption here. Are you there? I lost you on audio and everything. I lost everything, buddy. Are you still there? I'll just wait until you come back.
And the technologies they couldn't figure out.
You just came back. I lost you for like a whole minute there, and I still got red. I got red showing up on your internet connection. Oh, there. Now you're back.
Red alert. It's actually red on your internet connection. Mine's good, I think. Let's see. Hold on. Maybe not. Probably.
I don't know. I've got it on.
The gremlins finally decided to show up. All right. Well, we've got about 900 people watching this live.
Yeah.
So, yeah, still here. I think that might have been your internet connection. I don't know. All I was saying was the Aratta civilization. There's storylines that talk about how Inanna went from the kingship of Aratta, was with the king of Aratta. She left the king.
Yeah, that's good stuff. That's good stuff right there. So, and actually, some of that I saw was online in on the Oxford online. What's it? ETCSCL or something like that. Etzel.
Yeah.
University of Oxford online cuneiform. You'll find it. Anyway, what else? Is there anything else from the Atrahasis that is on your mind? Because, you know, I used to view the Atrahasis, the Enuma Elish, as two of probably the most important Sumer docs that people should read for themselves.
Yes.
Because of is there anything else? You know, one thing I want people to understand is that Atrahasis was another name for Noah, and he was Enki's son. That's why he saved him. So just putting that right up front, because a lot of people don't get through all the tablets and figure this out, but that comes out on the mount in our Ararat, where Enki encounters Enlil, and they have this discussion, because Enlil's really pissed that anybody survived, right? He says, "We, the great Anuna, swore a pact that no life would survive," while they're in the aircraft surveying humans laying in the mud like sticks, okay, after the flood, the deluge. And that's when Ninmah, the mother of humanity, broke out in tears and blamed Enlil for killing them all. But, you know, who gave him the order, really? Because, you know, you go back in the record, Anu, that his was the highest ranking one on the council, and he was given the orders. So the fact that they tried to wipe out the humans in multiple instances before the flood with famine, disease, starvation, that had to have been coordinated between Enlil and Anu. And we see this later as well, that Anu gave the permission to Enlil to destroy the city of Ur while his son Nannar was the king there with all the people there. So I don't know why Anu treats the hybrids on this colonized planet that way, but apparently, Rex, there have been 6 total resets on this planet where all human or all hybrid life was completely wiped out by the Anunnaki. And that was stated in the threat briefing report. It actually was quite frightening to see that. And
Well, that's interesting because
could it
the,
happen
the,
again? Could it happen again? You betcha it could. Is it
the
underway?
secret doctrine. Oh, sorry. We're both getting so excited. We're talking at the same time. That's what happens when you get us together, man.
Well, you've been pointing out all these things that are being done to poison humanity and blah, blah, blah. And part of it, in my opinion, through history is they've done it because they had enough slave workers. And if they killed off the weaker ones, they'd have nothing but stronger ones. So they were just, since humans have taken themselves out of the cycle of nature, right? We go shop at grocery stores. We don't live like an animal that's sensitive to climates, and we have lights and we create our own environment. We're not sensitive to that anymore. So you can see how we would not be able to be kept under control from a population standpoint because we're not like the rest of the creatures. So they've taken it on themselves to create wars, decimate us. And if you could be led into your own desires that led to your death, and that was just part of your karma, right? So they've been culling us like animals forever, even back in the Atrahasis. After 600 years, the people were so prolific, they didn't know what to do with them. Well, look, we got the United States, it's 300 years old, or 200 and something years old, has 300 million people after many, many wars. How many would there be there after 600 years? That's double the age of what it is right now. So it could have been a lot of folks, right? Could have had a
yes, and
yeah. So
do you think these civilizations, like the Anasazi, as an example, the Mayans, the Aztecs, do you think that there could be some type of transcending process where literally they transform time and space and matter, or they get just wiped out via the Anunnaki? Okay, they're too close, or okay, it's time to pick them up, and they're going to go travel the stars with us on this one spaceship. We're going to go check out the Guadalupe Islands on this other Earth 2.0.
I think there's a little of both. And from an article I was just reading yesterday, when they were mapping out with the Sira radar the Egyptian Giza Plateau in 1978 with Dr. Jim Hurtak and his crew on the Giza project. At the same time, they had discovered using this radar that in northern Guatemala that there were 800 kilometers worth of tunnels underneath Tikal that spanned all the way north and crossed over into Mexico through the Mayan biosphere. Well, now, just last year, I think it was, or this year, they flew that aircraft over and they announced the 50,000 new above ground edifices that they found in the Mayan biosphere, right, in Guatemala. Well, that underground structure there that they have found is so massive that they could put minimally 500,000 people in there, no problem. So you're asking, when an outside event came, did they go underground? Did they go via craft somewhere else? I think there was a combination of things, actually. And I think there's a lot of explaining to do about what's underground in some of these complexes, both in the Giza complex underneath that's been talked about, in a movie that's supposed to have come out called Chambers of the Deep, where Dr. Hurtak said there's mile-wide or kilometer-wide lakes underneath the Giza complex. We were in there in a dinghy in 1978. There's entire cities underground there that fill the entire Nile Valley. This is the halls of Amente, okay? This is what Thoth was talking about in the Emerald Tablets, that the superficial structures built on the surface, the Giza complex, is just there as an edifice to let you know there's something underneath there. But the surface is nothing compared to what's underneath.
Let me add one thing to that too, because that's fascinating. And also, I recently watched a quick video about how the Great Pyramid of Giza, the original Pyramid of Giza, is linked up with, depending on which star that it lines up with, will show, it's kind of like a galactic clock. So you'll know which age is coming in, and it's literally linked to the King's Chamber. If you take the King's Chamber and you were to put this, ruler that goes into the space, it would line up specifically with a particular star. And I can't remember which star it is right now, but when there's a change, and that would make me think the Anunnaki possibly when they transition to the next rule of power, and then the Mayans. Here's one. So let's get into this. The Mayans, they talked about the 2012 changes, the end of the world as we know it. Not the end of the world, but the end of the world as we know it. The birth pains are all around us, all around us.
Well, yeah. One of the birth pains that you brought up the other day, I think you ought to talk about this. Tell me about the Steamboat Geyser. It's normal eruption cycle and what's happened in this last year, because that is very significant what you stumbled across there. I hope you know that.
Well, I feel that it is, Gerald. But you know what's interesting is those podcasts, especially now, it's like the shelf life is over. It's funny how people knock on the media when they stop covering certain topics. It's because people just get bored of certain topics. They're like, oh, so what? First of all, it's a huge deal. Thank you for bringing this up. The Steamboat Geyser has erupted 11 times in 4 months. It erupted again just 3 days ago. Today's the 8th, right? It erupted 3 days ago on the 5th. I didn't even get media coverage. 11 times in 4 months. Before that, 10 times in 28 years.
Yeah, this is.
And what about last year, Gerald? All those swarms of earthquakes, like 4, 5, 600, 2,000 earthquake swarms. Oh, no big deal. Oh, yeah, it's just highly concentrated gas from Yellowstone.
Well, what you're doing is exactly what showed up in the movie 2012. You're watching the very spot that showed up in the movie 2012 that was a indicator of global earth changes. Well, it's not just Yellowstone, okay? I mean, it's happening all over the planet. There's something disturbing the planet such that it's going through some perturbations that are showing up as earthquakes and volcanoes. And I think it's pretty obvious now to go from 1997, where you had an average of what, 14,000, to the year 2012, suddenly we're up over 100,000 now. Well, that's a big increase in activity, and there's got to be a reason for that, especially when the sun's going into a solar min. Okay, that ought to tell you something right there, that whatever it is, it's affecting the sun and us. Okay, it's coming from the outside of that, and the only thing that could be is either a visiting intruder body, or we're approaching the galactic center, just like the Mayans told us. So if you count down from August 14th, 3000, or August 11th, 3014 BCE to where we are right now, we're at the place that the Mayans said we would be entering the fifth sun. And that energy from that sun, they said, creates universal consciousness. Now, what does that mean? What's that? Does that mean we're conscious of these other dimensional beings among us, and that we're not thinking we're the smartest monkeys on this rock that we didn't even know was floating through space? Right? So I think
it's flat and it's under a dome, Gerald. You didn't know that?
Well, if they could do that and lower the prices of vegan food, I'm moving there.
Yeah. It's a dome, man. It's a dome. Nobody told you that. It's so funny how the past couple of years, I think this
PSYOP after
starts.
PSYOP.
Never mind. I'm not going to get into it. Not even going to get into it. Hey, 3D printed vegan food will be a reality within the next couple of years.
Could very well be. Yeah, 3D printing's big. Definitely.
You saw the 3D printed lab meat, right?
No. After I watched the Health Ranger do his little analysis of chicken McNuggets and a burger, I'm like, I am so glad I'm a vegan, that I have no interest in eating that stuff. Oh my God, it's disgusting.
It's tough to transition to that point, isn't it? I mean, once you do it, it's easy, but to actually transition from a carnivore, loving meat, loving, fish, steaks, burgers, then saying, no, plant only, buddy.
Well, how hard, just as a species, imagine the thousands of years we've been learning to survive. We look at nature and what it does, and life feeds on life. Animals eat other animals, and so we would obviously think that's a normal thing to do, but we probably never thought about, well, what does it do to your energy level? Do you even care? Do you distinguish? So this is where I got to was, well, I thought about it not so much that, and yes, the creator of all and the geneticists that set up the simulation set it up that life feeds on life. Do I like it? No, not at all. I personally have thought a long time as a programmer, and I write lots of programs. How would I do it from a genetic algorithm standpoint so that animals didn't have to cull other populations of animals and they lived a normal lifespan? And if they got to be too much for the resources, that you could put something in their genetic code so they lost the desire to procreate, for instance. I mean, if you have that level of control over them and making them repetitively go into heat and all that and procreate, and for humans, what is it, every 3 days? You're talking about ridiculous. You could change that so that they didn't have to cull each other by eating each other with the carnivores and the herbivores. See what I'm saying? So I don't know, but who am I to question the geneticists that set it all up. But for me, my energy is better when I don't eat other life forms that other than plants. And well, it's not for everybody, but it definitely is for me. And I will never change back, ever. It's been over 10 years. There's no going back for me. And the change,
That's awesome.
And the change in the evolution of your consciousness. Let's just talk in generally about that, what we can do for ourselves. We can change our diet. We can change our activity levels, right? If you are a couch potato, you're not going to feel as good energetically as if you at least get a little motion and exercise, whatever that range is that's needed for you, okay? Whether you want to be, I don't know, doing step aerobics or running half marathons, it's just wherever you're at. But what I wanted to share something that Rex brought up earlier that I discovered, and I didn't know they were related. When I was a VP of engineering, sitting in my office chair in design company, electronic companies, broadcast companies where I work.
Can you talk a little closer to the microphone?
Yeah, about the time I was 34, I was having so many problems structurally that I ran into something that really helped me, and I shared that with Rex recently. And that was the idea that this is plastic, it's malleable. Look at a woman who has a baby, how much their body can change and then come back to normal, okay? You are made of malleable material that can be changed. And we know this through yoga and extreme contortionists, how much that can go if you want it to be that, okay? But what I discovered was through the process of structural integration that you could have a very different energetic experience with your body, that sometimes you can't overcome these on your own through the damage and process that's happened to you, even from birth trauma, accidents, whiplash, falling off a horse. All the things that happen to us affect our ability to be connected with the gravity field. So that's what Gravity Body Structural Academy is all about. And it was set up to give people the ability to do this online without going through a bunch of red tape, where if they want to do it to each other in the family and learn how to change each other's malleable body, okay, this is not rocket science, okay? But once you understand the principles, you realize you can change your body leaning on the edge of a counter like the one back behind me here, you know? So pressure and tension and temperature and frequency all change our structural antenna. And what we did is Chris and I got together and we encapsulated on videos that exact process and how to do that for each other. I mean, high definition with animation, everything, I can make it fun. I mean, how much fun is it to look at somebody, you know, rubbing or pushing on someone else? It's not fun, okay? So but the principles involved and the holding patterns that can be overcome are an absolute amazing new rebirthing experience for when you find that place. And we've worked very hard to find that place, and we're trying to share it with people. But how do you describe the taste of food to somebody? You can't do it, right? So it's very hard to describe this energetic feeling. And so hopefully people that are in the know and in this space will give us a try. And we have several people now that are in the school already that are working through the material and looking to become gravity body, structural integration, community ministers that don't need licensing, that don't need continuing education courses every year so you have to spend money. You'll be a minister in business, healing your community, whatever size that community is for you. It might just be your friends and families, fine. Or maybe this information is just for you to know yourself better so you can have a better avatar experience going through the simulator. So I won't say anything more about that. Do you have questions or?
Yeah, that's fascinating. The human antenna is incredible, and you wrote about that extensively in the Mercury Rising book that's available at GeraldClark77.com, also on Amazon. And I've got a signed copy, by the way. Hello. I've also got a signed copy of the Anunnaki of Nibiru. Great books, great material. I want to talk about that for just a moment, and maybe in the last section here of this amazing podcast, I'm reading through the comments section and people are like, oh, this is awesome. Oh, Gerald's back. Oh, Rex, what took you so long? Way too long. Thank you for having him back. Stuff like that. So this is funny. Awesome.
Now you got quite a dedicated group of people there that are following you. So,
well, they're following information and I'm just presenting it. So, and I appreciate
that's a good way to
them being here. What's that?
We're breaking up a little bit. I'm sorry.
That's all right. No problem.
It's a good way to see
folks,
yourself.
His internet isn't that good because he's literally in the jungle and I'm in the mountains. So, but I've got pretty good internet. But the human antenna, is very important. And I watched the UFC fights last night. I am a fan of watching mixed martial arts, and watching Daniel Cormier just knock out the heavyweight champion. It was just like, wow. And I know that those guys at that level, their body is, you know, they're so limber, they can do so many things with their body, but also I think a lot of that has to do with the integration techniques that you incorporate.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, another really cool gentleman that has been on the show before in a roundtable that you've worked with is a big fan of, and he's a mixed martial artist. He's incredible. He's on tour right now, I think, but training for some fights. But he's gone through your work, and he read your book on the human antenna, and that really.
You talking Zach Lang?
Zach Lang, yeah, excellent man.
Yeah, he's gonna be unstoppable. Let me just talk a little bit about structure work and fighters. I didn't know I was going to end up in this position, but I had my structural practice running out of a Gold's Gym on Sports Arena Boulevard in San Diego, right next to the sports arena where they were putting on MMA fights. And so I ended up, we had an octagon cage at Gold's Gym, and I ended up with quite a lot of exposure to the fighters. And listen, you're talking about wanting to have your body work right. When you get in the middle of the ring, you don't want anything busted up so that you can't use it. So they were, and that's what I loved about fighters is when they found structure work and they could use and understand and own their body in the gravity field, they became practically unstoppable. Okay, because you operate differently when you have a relationship with gravity that's so light and free. Okay, it actually makes you a superhuman. And so once they discover that, they all want it. Okay, and this has been true with all sports since the 60s that have discovered, how do I get into the athletic zone? Because sometimes people will cross it and they're like, wow, I felt like I had the energy, the relationship with gravity, the balance, nothing hurt, I could do this forever. And they get into this place in their performance metric where they want to be able to achieve that every time. And what they discovered was that structure work in the 60s was the secret weapon that allowed them to get access to that. And it's not been heavily marketed for that reason. It's been the secret weapon, right? But a lot of sports teams have these kind of people, structural integrators, on their staff that do this kind of work for their super athletes, okay? A lot of football teams, a lot of sports teams have them. But now we're trying to bring it to the mainstream, back to the public, because the reality is this is for everyone. It's not just for athletes. A better relationship with gravity will change your energy body. And I was able to discover this with various imaging tools. I think people who experience yoga or energy work, they can tell that there is a difference. But when your antenna lines up in the gravity field, because gravity is so strong and part of the equation, it has a big impact on you, on your perception and your performance. So I don't know if I said enough about that. I don't want to.
Well, no, that's good. And the way you feel, the way you think, the way you act. I mean, if your back's sore, are you going to be less likely to go work out that day? Probably. Right. If your back feels good. Now, one more time before we go, Gerald, your website, geraldclark77.com, but where is the YouTube channel and the website to get access to this incredible information on body work and the human antenna?
Okay, so the Gravity Body Academy is going to have a website. I just reserved it a couple of days ago, but we've completed the entire coursework, segregated into the anatomy and physiology piece, because a lot of people need that in yoga and licensed massage therapy. They need an anatomy course separate from the structure course. Okay, that's why they're separated. But if you go to my website, we have premium content shown right on the front. And on that page, there's a link to the channel where all of the media is stored, my premium content, and also the products, which are the Gravity Body Structural School and the Anatomy course. Okay, so you can see it's all very visible right from my first page of my website, geraldclark77.com.
Awesome.
So
Gerald, you are a legend, my friend, and I really hope that you'll come back on the show again sooner than later. Love to have you back on again. Okay. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here with us. Before we go, Gerald, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us or information that you think is important?
I think one of those things I was saying that we could do to prepare ourselves, try to glom onto that antenna energy that's coming from the galactic center and get there as quick as we can. I think it's going to increase to the point where you can't avoid it. Okay, especially when entities like Marduk get the slap down to stop spraying nanoparticles in our atmosphere, so we receive the energy we're supposed to be getting. Okay, another thing. But part of that is I want to put a plug out for Krista, my wife, who's put out hundreds and hundreds of videos and recipes on how you can experience a vegan lifestyle and not have any want or lack or think that all you eat is salad, okay? Because that has a big impact on your energy as well, and I just want to put that plug out for her. Because I think
she's got some great cookbooks. She's been on the Leak Project a couple times. Folks, if you want to see how to make some good food, vegan style, Leak Project style, check it out. Krista Clark. You can just type in Leak Project, Krista Clark. Plus, she's got a great website, great YouTube channel, great cookbooks, and all vegan, plant-based, health-based products. Just wonderful stuff. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you for being here. Be excellent to each other. Also, I want to give a huge shout out. Make sure, ladies and gentlemen, what's been around longer than the Anunnaki, at least here on Earth? Gold. What did the Anunnaki come here for? Gold. Would you like some gold? Did you know that you can actually move your 401 or your IRA into gold? Noble Gold Investments gives you an opportunity to move your 401 or IRA into precious metals. It's easy, it's quick, and for Leak Project listeners, free books, free material. If anything, just get the free books, get the free material, click the links in the video description box. That's my shameless plug. You'll thank me later. Be excellent, everybody, and thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Gerald.
Blessings, buddy. Okay.